ahead and look at what is biology. Where did it start? What's the history of biology? What is it? You should be, again, reading your chapter, so it should be a lot. It should be more familiar to you than those people that haven't read the chapter yet. People that have started to read the chapter, this is what the chapter's about. Yeah. Study of life is correct, right? So bio means life. And logi means the study of. All right, so biology in its essence is the study of life. But of course, that's not all there is to it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a whole lesson on it. It's a lot more complicated than it seems. Like most things in life, things are not as simple as it might seem. So let's take a we're going to go ahead and look at some of the interesting things about biology. I have listed a bunch of information there. Gee, there's a bunch of information here gotten from a website. The website had many, many, many pages. I think I referenced it. It's the Encyclopedia Britannica. This is just a section, just clips from the article on what is biology. And I just copy and pasted 6 bullet points out of pages. What did I do when I did that? When I have those 6 bullet points? I did the 6 R's. Which one of the 6 R's did I do when I took those 6 bullet points and downloaded? Yes, I did record. Yeah, very good. But what else did I do? I haven't reviewed yet. Yeah, reduced. That's right. I reduced. I took many, many pages and I put them into 6 bullet points. But that's still a lot, isn't it? I mean, do you think that I'm going to have you memorize this to test you on it? Do you think I'm going to have you write it out as an essay? Write out the 6 bullet points that I gave you on August 17th. Thank you, that's your test. Goodbye, walk out, go to the bathroom, come back, and you're done? No, I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous, right? But that's a lot of information, so now we have to reduce it a little more. So I'm going to read them to you. Earliest recorded history, I'm not going to write all this out, right? But I'm just going to say 6 bullet points here. And I'll put a couple words here for each one just to represent the 6 bullet points. You already have the 6 bullet points written there, so I'm not going to go ahead and rewrite it. So the first bullet point says, the earliest recorded history of biology is derived from an Assyrian and Babylonian bas relief showing cultivated plants and carvings depicting veterinary medicine. All right, from carvings depicting veterinary medicine. So they show, you know where the Babylonians were? Where is Babylonia? Or where was Babylonia? Anybody? No. Iran, really, not Iraq. So we call it Iraq today, but it is actually a whole empire. Iraq didn't exist back then. It was just one giant Babylonian empire. One of the earliest civilizations we know of in the Middle East. The earliest was in Africa, in a place called Timbuktu. It's one of the great early empires. Then, of course, Egypt, which is northern Africa / Middle East. It's in between. I don't know which you'd like to call it. But the Babylonians were a great civilization, the foundation of a lot of what we know today, foundation of a lot of inventions. And one of the things that they cultivated plants. Cultivating plants is a science. Plants are alive, and they studied it, so that's biology. Yes? Okay. Veterinary medicine, obviously taking care of the animals that they cultivated was important as well. Babylonians learned the date palm produces sexually, and that pollen could be taken from the male plant and used to fertilize the female plant. Pollen is male sperm. They don't have sperm. They don't wiggle like ours. They don't move. Plants don't move. They don't have cells that move. But plants do have gametes. We call them gametes. and they're analogous. Pollen is analogous. Do you know what the word analogous means? Anybody know? Analogous means it's similar to. It's like. The word like and analogous are the same, pretty much have the same meaning. So pollen is analogous to, you should write that word down if you don't, because guys, you're going to have the SAT in like 2 years. Analogous, how to spell it? Now spelling is something, spelling's my enemy. But I'm going to go ahead and try to spell it for you. Analogous. I'm going to get rid of this overline. So I'm going to try and spell it. I'm going to say A-N-A-L-O-G-U-S. Is that right?
We can't see it.
Oh, why is it? I'm going to have a talk with this guy.
It's A-N-A-L-O-G-O-U-S.
I think I spelled it all right. I don't know why this computer has to mess up on my... So I spelled it that way, is that right?
Yeah.
All right, so analogous means like. So when you read something like, I don't know, I can't think of anything right now, but... So Babylonians, sperm, the male gamete in humans and mammals, is analogous to or is like the gametes in male plants. Not all plants have male-female parts, but male plants have gametes that are similar to sperm. We call that pollen. All right, so they release it to the air. All right. So Babylonians learned that. Now that's amazing. Why is that so amazing? Like, who thinks of that? Yeah, what else is amazing about that? Yeah.
They didn't have nearly enough resources, they didn't have enough, as much resources as we do now.
That's right. What kind of resources? Microscopes, right? They didn't have microscopes. We have microscopes, and so when we see a flower, no matter how odd the flower is, like there's a flower that looks something like this, I think. It is. I could show it to you. It's a red flower. It looks something like this. And inside most a flower, you're going to have these little structures. I'll name them later when we break it down. But they have this like dust. It's literally dust that sits on them.
That fuzzy stuff.
That fuzzy stuff that sits on that part of the flower. And then there's not all flowers they all have similar structure. Again, we'll go over some flower structure later in the year. But there's this little tube that leads down to another chamber. And down here are the analogous structures, are the eggs of the flower. The flower is the plant's sexual organ. All right, so where mammals have male-female sexual organs. A flower has one sexual organ that has both male and female parts. And what flowers usually like to happen, they usually don't want to self-fertilize, so they don't usually want the pollen to fall in the eggs and then they make babies with themselves. That's not the best option for flowers. The best option is that the wind with some plants, with some flowers, a bee, for some other flowers or hummingbirds or whatever, a pollinator, we call them, what word did I just use? Goes into a bee goes into the flower to get nectar. Flowers produce sweet stuff, sweet juices that of fructose, a sugar called fructose, right? So there's nectar in here, and that nectar attracts the bee. That's why the bee's going in there, to get nectar, to get food that it takes back to the hive. They make honey with that nectar. We use honey to sweeten our tea, right? But the bees are making honey for their hive. When the bee goes in there, the pollen gets knocked loose and sticks to the bee. So when the bee goes to the next flower, some of that pollen falls in, and they have the two parts, the male and female parts of two different plants meet, and they produce seeds and new plants. That's the ideal way that plants have babies. They don't really want to have sex with themselves. All right, let's define this word sex before I go any further, because I see some eyes opening up. So let's be clear what I mean by sex in this class. Sex in this class in biology, and the only thing that sex really means is mixing up DNA. To have
Offspring.
a baby. Let's not use baby. Let's use offspring. I like that. That's it. That's all sex means. Everything else that we add to sex is added by the world in this class. In biology, it's just having two different beings coming together to have a baby and make a new being. And plants have sex, humans have sex, goats, whales, just everything that's alive. Most things that are alive have sex. Even bacteria exchange DNA in a way, but they don't really have sex. They usually reproduce in another way called asexually, so they don't mix up their DNA normally.
Is there something like different about lavender? Because mostly all the bees, like if you walk past a lavender bush or another flower, most of the bees would be around lavender, but not the other flower.
That's a really, really great question. I have to get moving. I don't want to get sidetracked too much. But let me ask you a question. Why do you think flowers produce colors? Why do flowers make red? They're beautiful, aren't they? Red, purples, and oranges and yellows, right? Why do plants? They don't have eyes. They're not doing it for themselves. To attract organisms, pollinators, right? They don't produce plants. Why do plants produce fruit? Well, not a good question, good guess. But by then, your fruits have seeds. Those are the babies already. They're not the gametes. So they fill that fruit. Let's think of a mango, or think of an orange. They fill this thing. They make it really bright color. It's really bright. It tastes really sweet. And inside it are the seeds, the plant's babies. Seeds are plants' babies. Those are baby plants. So when you're eating sunflower seeds, you're eating baby sunflowers. You're a baby killer, basically. But here's this orange sitting in a tree, right, with the seeds in it. Why did the orange tree put its babies surrounded by sugar? What's sugar going to do? It's going to attract what? No. Well, yeah, if it were in a flower. But this is, a bee can't get into the sugar in an orange, right? To attract us. Why does it want to attract animals that are going to eat their babies? That's right. We'll eat the fruit. We'll swallow the seeds, but the seeds are protected. The babies are protected by an outer covering. And what do we do that they can't? Well, they digest too, actually. We poop, that's true. But they kind of throw out waste as well. The question is, what can we do that plants absolutely cannot fundamentally do? Talk, yes, that's true, although they do communicate. There are examples of plants telling other plants there's something's eating me. They send signals, chemical signals to the plant next door, and you'll see changes. The plants around them will react to an attack. What eats them? Caterpillars, humans. No, they can't. They can't run, but they can change. They can start producing poisons. So they start producing poisons because something's starting to eat me, and I tell my neighbor starts to produce poisons. So I might die. I'm going to start producing poisons too, but I might die because they're already eating me. But by the time they get to my neighbor, which is probably my son, right? It could be my parent, but by the time it gets to my neighbor, it's going to find a surprise. It's going to find poison for it. But what is it? You just said it. You just hinted to it, Rice. What can these things that the plants are trying to track do that they can't? Move. So you eat the orange, you swallow the seeds, but you don't poop right away, do you? Well, you walk along, you go back home, whatever. Then you go poop. I imagine back in days before toilets, you poop, and now those seeds have fertilizer, and they've moved away. So they spread their babies around using that fruit. That's important for trees. You don't want 100 trees growing in the same area, because then you're competing with your own child. And that doesn't make sense, right? All right, so those are kind of interesting thoughts. So the Babylonians understood some of that. What's amazing is someone said earlier they didn't have microscopes. We have microscopes today. We dissect flowers. We have really sharp instruments that can cut these things up and we can look at them under microscopes. We can understand these internal structures. They did it without all that. That's amazing. So this is the good part of all this. And there's some more examples there. I don't want to get too much into it, but there are plenty of examples. And we're talking, I just want you to get an idea of the time span. All this understanding of technology is 2,500 years before the Common Era, BCE. The Common Era, we're in the Common Era now, and this is the year 2022. Add to that 2,500 years, now you're talking about 4,522 years ago. They were able to do all this. It's amazing. So biology is a pretty old science. There is a problem, though. Back then, obviously civilizations came and went. So you had these periods, I don't know if you watch sci-fi movies, but what sci-fi movies love to depend on is these periods of civilization gaining, becoming enlightened. For instance, the ancient Chinese had a lot of technology. They developed a lot of amazing scientific knowledge, but then something happened. Some catastrophe, some war. The Mongols attacked, or the Romans battled them, or whatever. And civilization lost some of its developments. And you've heard of and we went back to our normal kind of lack of technology and our old habits of hunting and gathering, maybe some basic farming techniques. Some things stayed around, but the development of new technologies kind of stopped. It didn't really get any better, or even got worse. For instance, have you heard of the Dark Ages? In the Dark Ages, we lost a lot. It didn't just not grow, we lost a lot. Now today, we keep advancing. The technology advancing is not necessarily a good thing, as you can tell with global climate change, right? But technology kept advancing, and today it's still advancing. And one could argue it's still advancing at kind of an uncontrolled rate. But the bottom line is that our understanding, which is, as a scientist, I have to say, understanding is never a bad thing. Understanding is never a bad thing. And our understanding is going up. So understanding of how things work. Yes, question? Yes. You know the procedure. So historically, biologies don't follow this same path. And what we found is, because we're studying life, what else do we know is alive? What do we know is alive? What is life? This is a question we're going to have to define, but we're not going to define it today. I want you to think about that. Write it down. What is life? And so that would be kind of a question I would add over here. What is life? And I would say add another question over here or a statement. Biology has been around But what is life? It's interesting because historically, it's a really big question. There have been times, and And there have been times with some of our most revered, you've heard of the Greeks, yes? Well, the Greeks and many of our greatest thinkers thought that rocks were alive. Yeah, rocks. They thought there was this essence. Life came from this essence. They didn't really have a good definition of that. Words they used. I'll let the Greek teacher talk to you about the words. But that rocks had this essence. If they had this essence, they were alive. In the Jewish Bible, they called them golems, rocks that came alive. In fact, in fantasies, we imagine statues moving, right? Well, they thought that was possible. They believed it was possible. If this anime comes from the word anime that you all like to use, right? That word actually comes from some ancient Greek, right? Where things become animated, they be moving. If they move, they must have that essence of life. In Chinese culture, they looked at other things like qi, right? The qi flows through from heaven, and I don't know. I don't understand this stuff. I just know that I'm talking about in general, right? There's this flow of energy is somehow part of being alive. And during the Dark Ages, if you got hot, you were thought to have too much of this type of energy, and that's what was killing you. What did they do to you? Do you know? They didn't kill you. Well, they did kill a lot of people, but they were trying to release that energy because you had too much of that energy. In acupuncture, I don't know if you know this, but in acupuncture, they stick you with needles in order to help you that energy flow, right? In the Dark Ages in Europe, they went kind of extreme, and they wanted to release the energy of fire. They thought it was a fire energy. They wanted to release it. What did they do to you? They cut you open. They bled you.
Oh my God.
Yeah. You were sick. You had a fever. They laid your arm out and they cut your vein, bled you for a while, get that heat out of you. You got colder because you're dying. Yeah, but they didn't know that. See, that's the problem with not being scientific, right? You have to think logically. You have to look for evidence. You have to compare. If you're not doing that, you make some really big mistakes. Really big mistakes. And for hundreds of years, they bled people. Turns out bleeding someone is not, especially if they have a really big wound. People still use leeches today to get rid of wounds. I don't know if you know that. Do you know what leeches are? They're animals that'll suck out bleed. There are people that have leeches. They're medical leeches. They're not. They just don't go out in the swamp and grab some leeches. But if you have a black eye, it's all swollen. They could more than one bride who's accidentally hit a doorknob with her face has gone to get leeches put on the swelling to reduce the swelling and get rid of the black and blueness. The leech will suck out the liquids that are there, the blood and the interstitial fluid. So it's interesting that we could we learn something even from those Dark Ages, right? So anyways, the point is in biology, there have been all these misconceptions, and that's really the whole point of science, modern day biology and science in general, is to try to deal with misconceptions. Misunderstandings, understandings that are not correct. Can I give you some examples of? Did I give you some examples already in this class? No, okay, because I did yesterday. I wasn't sure what was going on. To some classes, I'll tell you. I'll share with you one big misconception. We all have misconceptions. I don't care if you're if you're a genius and you're the head of a science department at Harvard. You still have misconceptions. About what? Who knows? You don't even know until you find out when you get the wrong answer. And then you ask yourself, well, how did I get the wrong answer? Then you learn that you had that mistake. Well, I'm going to give you a real embarrassing one that I had. I'm 55 years old, and my wife and I were married for a while. She's from Brazil. Did I tell you that? Okay, so that was a real big misconception. So misconceptions happen. They happen until you test them, but hopefully The idea of science is to try to deal with the misconceptions and try to find those direct correlations between cause and effect before you get to those errors and somebody dies or somebody, walks off a cliff or something. The great ancient Greeks dealt with it by trying to find logic and arguing, which is amazing. I mean, their logic and their arguments and their discussions were just something that's really intellectually stimulating and really important to the process of thinking. Okay, I mean, I'm not trying to make less of their accomplishments. But one thing that you have to understand is they had some real problems with the way they thought. For instance, they argued themselves into believing that the sun was the center of the universe, the earth was the center of the universe, that they argued themselves into, arguing meaning logically deducing, right, themselves into thinking that the stars were being pushed by angels, the planets were being pushed by angels in the opposite directions and that kind of thing. That it was a disc. There's a lot of arguments that people made, but they made them because they had these misconceptions, and then they tried to build upon them. So if you have a misunderstanding and you build upon that misunderstanding a set of further understanding, then the whole house of cards collapses. Then everything you thought was wrong. The Greeks didn't invent, but developed a process of thinking that's still today, and I use it, people use it, people learn it in college. You'll learn some of it in Greek when you take it here in high school. But the point is that kind of a Socratic way of arguing and talking is incredibly important. However, modern science does a little more than that. We experiment. We say, oh, you think this earth is the center of the universe? Okay, let's design an experiment to test that. Let's test it. Right? Now that is the essence of modern science, of modern biology. So testing and how to test it, we call it the scientific method. The scientific method was developed. I'm not going to go over it. There's a lot of I think you'll read a little bit about it in the chapter. I'm telling you that I'm less concerned about the history of the scientific method. I gave you some kind of broad strokes now of the history of human thinking and science and understanding. But the whole point of the scientific method is to deal with the fact that humans make errors. We live, you will, I will, everyone that's human will make mistakes. It is natural, it is good to make mistakes, because every time you make a mistake, you have found a misconception. Your head is full of misconceptions. Full of them. Mine still is, and I'm 55 years old. Full of misconceptions. How do you fix those misconceptions? You have to identify them. The only way you identify them, they're in your brain. You've built a group of a whole house of understanding in your brain. How do you find those mistakes? You have to test them. So every time you make a mistake, bam, wow, that was wrong. Why was I wrong there? How was my thinking incorrect? So testing your misconceptions is incredibly important. Somebody keeping track of my time? Okay. All right. I got 9 minutes before the end of class?
No, before 8:45.
Oh, before I take it. Okay, good. All right. So how can we summarize this? How can we take all this we talked about? A lot of different things, didn't we? A lot of different ideas. How do we summarize this? Give me a summary. Anybody? Yeah.
Misconceptions occur more often than people think.
And what?
I just said,
I'm saying and what? And we need what? We need a way to,
figure them out, or
a way to, anyone else? A way to what? A way to test them. All right? So that's really kind of the thing that we have to really consider when because tomorrow, you know, you have lab tomorrow. And what's a lab? What do we do in our labs? We experiments. And what are experiments? Testing our ideas. We got to test our understanding. And if we test our understanding, then and only then can we really be clear on that our understanding is not chock full of misconceptions. We have to work very hard. Your whole life, you're going to have to do this. You can't rest. The minute you rest, I guarantee you, you're gonna live a life. I don't want to say it this way, but I'm going to say it just to be dramatic. Can I say something to be dramatic? Do you know what it means to be dramatic? All right. So just to make a point, I'll say this: you don't want to live a life of a lie, right? You don't want to live a lie. You want to try to live a truth. And the more you deal with these misconceptions, the closer to the truth you can get. We never can reach the truth. In science, reaching the truth is never a possibility. We can't. We're limited. We're always limited because we're human. Our perception, how much of the universe do you think we even perceive? We talked about the Babylonians. They didn't have microscopes. There's a whole world they didn't see. They tried to study life without ever being able to see inside. They could see inside life, but what did they have to do to it? Kill it. Today we can see inside with MRIs and with X-rays, but they didn't have that back then. So they never saw life work. So when the ancient Egyptians mummified a human, they saved everything they thought was the important part. They saved the hearts and the internal organs. They took the brain out with a hook, pulled it all out through the nose, pulled the brain out. The person was dead. Pulled the brain out through the nose and threw it away. They thought the brain was the most useless thing. It was just goo. Get it out of there. Ew. But we know today it was the most important part of you. It is you. Right? That's why we say today, we say we pledge allegiance with our hand over our heart. Because we thought for the longest time our soul is where? Our heart. But it's not. Who we are is not here, is it? It's here. But nobody knew that because you can't look inside it. You looked inside a skull, all you found was what looks like a pudding. An oddly shaped pudding. If you ever touch a brain, it's not gooey, but it's kind of rubbery. It's not like a heart. A heart you can feel pumping. You can if you cut someone open, it's not dead yet, you can see it pumping. So nobody really understood what was going on with the brain, with the inside of the body. And that's your own body. We have just recently, within the last couple hundred years, have we really understood we began to understand how the inside of our bodies work. And that's only what we can see. We can't see DNA do its thing. We can't see RNA do its thing. We can capture it. We can look at different X-ray crystallography. We can look at we can do computer models and all that. But we can't go inside a cell and watch it do transcription. We can't watch it do, oh wow, let's watch it turn this gene on and that gene on. Never seen it. How do we do that? How is it possible that most of the universe, we can't perceive it? Let me give you the clearest example of what I'm talking about. What are the forms of matter and energy that you know of? Go ahead. The things that you perceive, that you see and touch. Give me matter and energy. Yeah.
solid, liquid, gas.
Solid, liquid, and gas, yeah. There's even this stuff called plasma, right? That we can see. We have plasma TVs. It's just a gas, charged gas. Yeah.
Thermal energy?
Thermal energy, especially with goggles, we can see that. We can feel thermal energy, but it's a form of electromagnetic radiation, so it's light. Okay, so all right. Good. That's energy, that's matter. What if I told you everything you perceive, everything we perceive, you and me, everything you perceive is about half of what actually is? Half of it's gone. Half of it we can't even perceive. We can't touch it. We can't feel it, smell it, think. There's no sense that we have that can sense it. We call it dark energy and dark matter. It's all around us. It moves planets. It has something to do with the expansion of the universe, we think. We don't know because we can't touch it, can't smell it, can't measure it. There is a thought, there's I would say a lot of physicists think there could be as many as 11 dimensions. 11. Do you know what a dimension is? I'll tell you one dimension, length. Another dimension, I should say height, length, width. Those are the 3 dimensions that you and I are used to. There's a 4th dimension, time. The 4th dimension is time. So those are the 4. But a lot of physicists think there's 11 dimensions. So there's half the matter and half the energy. I say half, I don't know the actual number, I'm not a physicist. But half the matter, half the energy we can't perceive. Okay? And then we only perceive 4 of the 11 possible, maybe there's more, maybe there's not 11, I don't know. But of the possible 11 dimensions, we can only perceive 4 of them. So let me ask you, is there any way we could ever really understand what's going on? And at least not anytime soon, right? But we keep trying. And what is really cool about scientists is that here's what we say, or a lot of scientists say. We're just trying to find what works. We're trying to come as close as we can to finding out how things work. So we can, thank you. We're trying to get as close as we can to figuring out how it works so we can improve our lives. So we can keep reaching someday, not in my lifetime, not in your grandfather, not in your son's daughter's lifetime. But someday, maybe we'll understand more. So much so that we'll come close to understanding the universe. So anyways, the study of life is limited. We need experiments. We need to use logic. Thank you for the time. Let me see who's absent. Everybody here has a card. You don't have a card? Do me a favor, write your name down. You don't have a card? Could you put your name on the card? I'll have to make it this weekend. Could you guys put your name on a piece of paper, on one sheet of paper, and hand it to me? Everyone else has a card, is that correct? All right, so these are the only people I have absent today.
That's a lot.
That is. Some of these may not be enrolled anymore. You have a card? All right, so I got you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. Wrap up your stuff. Make sure your area is clean. When you have a bag of chips like this, and you guys want to eat the chips or whatever, again, I don't suggest you eat hot chips. There's all kinds of interesting, good-tasting vegetable chips that you can buy, just so you know. I know they're not hot chips, but still. I would suggest just pour it into a bowl. I have some bowls over there, so you're not crinkling your paper all day. It annoys people, and you can still eat your chips. I don't have anybody's card. Are there people's cards out there that did not have a human being next to it? All right. So could you collect your cards? Bring your cards and put them up here. Bring your cards and put them here. You came in Target, didn't you? Did you scan in?
No, I don't have a phone.
That's right. Why were you Target?
I came late.
All right. So tomorrow I'd like to have a little more about that. Let me know if I can help you with it and getting here on time. All right.